Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something almost every coach or consultant hits at some point when the referrals that once built your business suddenly stop. And what you do next will make or break your momentum.
And here's the twist. What we're going to talk about isn't about cold outreach. It's not about complicated funnels and pipelines and chasing leads. It's really about real conversations and the kind of conversations that build trust before you even make an offer to work with someone.
So, we're going to be talking about why your referral network will dry up, even if you're great at what you do.
And also what to do when you've evolved, but your old clients don't know about what that is, and how to talk about the new version of who you are and the things that you're up to.
And finally, the counterintuitive strategy that's working better than funnels right now. So, should we dig into that, Ped?
Let's dig into that, because I can tell you a little bit of a story about when I started to work for myself, and I had been using my own my own network, and just reached out to them, say, I'm self-employed right now. You know what I'm up to, what I can do. Is there any opportunities for us to work with each other? And that was great. It worked really well. And there came a point where I wanted to go beyond this. And me and my business partner at the time, so way before you and I started working with each other, Riley. That's right. I had other business partners. We had a little bit of I guess, like, hubris about what the world needed. My business partner, very well respected, executive head teacher. I had an education consultancy back then, and he'd done some really innovative things in his own schools. And we decided to try and package that up and go out to sell it to the market. And I remember we created this this pitch deck about these things called the skill hubs. And fun fact, that is why my business, when I set it up back then, it's called the Skills Lab. And we wanted to go around and pitch it to people, because we knew, quote unquote, we knew what was needed. And I remember that pitch, those pitches. I remember those very polite and pleasant nods, but nobody really fully getting it.
Yeah, it actually reminds me a little bit of the idea that's called the curse of knowledge, which actually would be in one of the books back there, but I just picked it up recently, so it's in another room right now. But the idea is essentially like it's hard to unknow something once you know it, which means that it's actually hard to then articulate that sometimes to a beginner who doesn't have the same level of knowledge or expertise. We actually just went through this the other day. We were talking about some tool. You were trying to explain it to me. I was not understanding, and I was like, "We're speaking a different language right now. There's a gap?" And that's essentially the curse of knowledge. And so, even like I almost want to say, even though it happens to the most experienced consultants and coaches, it actually more often happens to the most experienced coaches and consultants, because you hit this ceiling, because your knowledge and experience, it obviously came from somewhere. It was relevant in some context at some point, but eventually you get to this point where if you never adapt that or update that, or you're using the same model, you never learn a new skill or a new tool or a new framework, or more specifically a new, I'm going to use the word language,
Sure.
or what your clients or the market's needs or wants are, then eventually you're going to run out of steam. Like you will hit the ceiling, and not only will you hit the ceiling, but the ceiling's going to keep like pressing down on you. It'll get tighter and tighter, and you will shrink more and more until it just feels like you're stuck in this confined, claustrophobic space, because you haven't been actually going out and
What an
talking
image.
to the market.
Right. And here's the double whammy effect that happens when you've relied on referrals or relied on your network that knew you in a particular way, and then you evolve. It's like, well, there's no way to then, there's no reason for them to refer you, because there isn't that language that you're talking about, right? So this really makes it feel like when you're waiting for referrals, it's like waiting for rain to come. It might come, but when you dig your own well, that's how you stop getting thirsty. And this is the piece that, at least for me, it was so glaringly obvious that it was right in front of me because I'm a very curious, people-centered person. And when you start talking to people, that's when you start to understand what they're really about. And the reframe here is that it's when we speak to people, it's really about doing research. It's not this thing, this side thing that you do that is uh, getting in the way or even a waste of time. Actually, having these conversations, it's an opportunity to really understand what the market is wanting.
Yeah, and it's I'm gonna go back to that language piece. I mean, actually, a really specific example of this as well is we have a current client who is fluent in French, speaks French, has lived in France for decades, and so some of her English, she has told us, is like outdated, for lack of a better word. And so that same thing I think can happen with your offer, right? And so if the market doesn't know how to ask for what you offer, then you're going to be wondering why it is so quiet. Like it's just crickets. You're not hearing people because you're literally speaking different languages. You're using different words. And I have, um, I mean, so many examples that come to mind, but like in general, the one thing that I hear that prevents people from doing it because it like maybe at this point you're listening like, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. I need to speak the same language. I'm already there. I got to go talk to people. Okay. The talking to people part, we like so many people, coaches and consultants specifically, feel like talking to people before they go out and sell can just feel like they're procrastinating or like it's a waste of time.
Beyond that, I know that there's a lot of coaching consultants, myself included, which have perfectionistic tendencies,
Mhm.
and there is a sense that they need to know the answers before they go and talk to people, and it's a bit of a reframe and a rewiring. That
Mhm.
you look like you're about to say something about that.
Well, it's just because it sounds like logically, like just play that out. It's like I need to go ask questions, but before I ask the questions, I need to have the answers.
Right,
Like
and
that's
so, but that leads people to then think, well, before I go and speak to people and have these answers, you know what? I need to have a a digital shop front. I need to update my website. And you know, you and I both know that this is our own individual little gripes, that hidden procrastination of
yeah.
once my website's ready, I'm ready to go out in the world. But the next breakthrough isn't going to come from a new color palette or new brand guidelines or a new website, or even if you're so inclined to even know what a funnel is, which I never did when I started this game. I was like, well, what is a funnel? What is a pipeline? And you see the ads sometimes, and you're like, well, I think I need a funnel. I'm not sure, but yeah, that breakthrough isn't going to come from tinkering behind the scenes and not talking to people.
Yeah, the talking to people part, it's interesting because like the fastest path to sales isn't more pitching. It's more listening. Like stop guessing, start asking. And in order to do that, it's this weird, like I'll admit, you got to have the right mindset around it. And that word gets so overused. That's even like my master's degree is in a related field. So I get it. Sports psychology, mental performance, mental training, mindset. I get it. But it's from a business perspective, like you need to have you need that data. And by data, like it doesn't have to be quantitative data, it can be qualitative data. And coming from someone who did qualitative research, you can manipulate the qualitative data to give you quantitative, just like raw numbers. Like how many people are asking for this sort of thing? And in order to do that, this is the cool part where like you have to strike the right balance. You have to talk to people. But I think one of the things that comes up that gets in the way of that is when you look at the human component, putting the data stuff aside, if you're talking to people and you're scared that you don't know, you don't have all the answers, you're scared that you might not be perceived as an expert, you're scared of being rejected, or you're scared of being ignored, or you're scared of, stepping on someone's toes or inconveniencing or whatever. That I think is the real emotion. It's kind of like the elephant in the room, of like really like we need to bridge the gap between relationship building and collecting data, but it's those internal fears that can get in the way.
I was speaking to a coach trainer earlier today, and what I find really interesting is in that conversation, those two things that you just shared just played out exactly. So there was definitely a recognition that you need to speak to more people to collect that information about what they need. And this person I was speaking to, I love the way he phrased this. So I need to earn the right to, you know, he said a few different things, but essentially, in its essence, I need to earn the right to pitch. Right, not his words, but
Yeah.
I love that kind of earn the right to, and that comes from having conversation. And yet, in the same conversation, there was a, a desire to go and build out a program without speaking to anyone, and just get all of his thinking down before he goes and starts talking to people about it. And it's this, it's happening in the same conversation. It's like the recognition that you do need to speak to people, and yet feeling like you need to have the right answers. And I just don't know exactly where that comes from. Maybe it is that whole perfectionist tendency that I can definitely relate to. But when we go from that, when we go into that research mode, it reframes things from, hey, look at me and look at what I've got that you can use and get, have improvements in your life or your team or whatever it is, whether you're B2B or B2C. It goes from that to tell me more. And that it's a more spacious place to be.
Well, it's client centric as well. Like it's client focused, which actually it takes a lot of the pressure off of. Did I say that twice? It takes pressure off of of you, right? Because I mean that's the approach that I remember learning in a counseling based program, master's program, which was person centered therapy, and it's like you can have all the bells and whistles. I even remember the story of someone who went through the program who was a former professional hockey player, like an NHL US hockey player, and was working with an athlete who was also a hockey player, but like a student athlete, like 19 years old, something like that. And I remember learning that I thought, oh, well, you should clearly let them know that I used to be a pro back in the day and like you should listen to what I said. But no, never mentioned it because it wasn't in service of the client. It had nothing to do with the actual work that needed to get done. And so you're only revealing parts of yourself. Actually, might shout out Mark LaRousse here because he's someone that shares a lot of this on LinkedIn, and we both know very well. And his tagline here is, your story is about you, but it's not for you. And so it's revealing the parts that are important. So really, like when you shift that into like this, I'll call it sales, because you're not selling yourself so much as you're trying to listen to like the person and the problems and the what do they need, what do they want, and just how is there anything you can do. It's kind of a little bit more of a service orientation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's someone who comes to mind who, can I share we have,
So that example.
yeah, we have an example. So Rob is someone who went through our program, gosh, I don't know, last year, a year ago, whenever it was. And I remember him, just to keep it short, he went through the program. He sold his first offer. He stayed in longer to kind of retool and reshape it, and then wound up selling it for 10x the price. And this is on the side of a full-time job, by the way. So kudos to him. And so this process, he went through, he did research, market research, and did that to help shape and create his offer. After he had his offer, his initial one, he continued to do more research to improve, not only improve the offer, but it also basically built him more pipeline. He was able to continue to relationship build and meet more people. And it just like it kept working. So he just kept doing it. I remember getting a message from him after we finished working with him. And he said, "Hey, I just wanted to say thank you." This was a voice note on X, as it's called now. And he was like, thank you, blah blah blah. And I just got another client, so it's 7,500 in like a 60-day period, again on the side of a full-time. So he was basically getting two incomes at this point, but just focusing on helping people. I know this sounds like an oversimplification, but that's what I mean by it's like this mindset shift.
Well, it's that mindset shift which also helps you to become the go-to expert. You become a go-to expert not necessarily because you've got the tools and know-how to help X, Y, or Z person. It's about what it is that's not working for them, what they want to achieve, and then how you then position the stuff that you do to meet those needs. And that's that magical product market fit thing that I know that I missed for a good chunk of my time was when I went to self-employment. And maybe it's because it's the word product makes it feel like it's a tangible thing. When you're a service business, you're a coach, consultant, it's maybe less tangible to think about the time, the services, the resources or tools that you give people. But actually the expertise comes from knowing what your clients want to achieve and the tangibility of that. And so, yeah, maybe the idea of product makes more sense when you think about what's the tangible outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That you will never know unless you speak to enough people and as the expert of that market, here's what these people want to achieve. And therefore, I'll design a service or a product to get them there.
Which kind of comes full circle here as we wrap up this episode, which is the idea of like chance versus predictability. And so the chance that someone just happens to know someone who might be interested in who you are, what you're doing, is kind of like the waiting for rain versus like having the tangibility. I'll use that word. Is that a real word?
Yeah, we'll go with it.
But it's like, what are the emotional anchors? What are the specific results and desired outcomes? Like those are the ways you can shape. And speaking of tangible, I mean, having data, like just again, that doesn't mean survey results. It means like qualitative data that you can look at, which I have not had a client. We have not had. I have not had a client that I can think of who has gone through this process, looked at their wall of data, and said like it did not make them feel more confident. Because it's just staring you in the face of like, this is what my market wants. Wow, it's so clear. And it's like the idea that, and I never want to tell someone, with maybe some exceptions, but to say no when a referral, someone who obviously you want to work with, comes to you, and that's amazing. And maybe that's how you built your business in the past. But if referrals build your past business, then research is what will build your future business.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And in a way, referrals is it's the gift that your research phase gives you in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because the research isn't random. It is a repeatable way to stay relevant, to be real and in demand, because you just know what people are needing.
Yeah. Yes. Agreed.
Yes.
So, on that note, are there any reflections that you have, Ped, to kind of sum up this conversation that maybe a listener or viewer could take away as well?
Yeah, I'd say, as you're thinking about the next phase of your business, what is it, or when was the last time that you spoke to someone who could be a client just to understand them better? Again, not to sell, not to prove, just to listen.
just listen. I think that's almost worth repeating, because again, that's another sticking point I see people hit is like uh they start just thinking too far ahead. It's like you just listening, just trying the data. The data is what we're looking for. So if this hits home and you think someone else, maybe a friend, maybe a colleague, maybe an acquaintance, should see or hear or listen to this episode, then send it to a friend who is still just waiting for those referrals to to roll in. And if you want a few simple questions that you can use to start your next 5 research conversations, then just either comment below or DM if you're seeing this on LinkedIn. It depends on the channel, but shoot a comment or a message with the word well on LinkedIn, because we want you to be digging a well, not waiting for rain.